April 2026 was meant to be a moment of triumphant sparkle for British tiaras in Washington. But Queen Camilla seems to have played by an entirely different set of rules. While everyone was busy guessing which diadem she'd pull from the vaults for the first White House banquet in nearly 2 decades, she surprised us all with treasures that had been tucked away for years. Pieces that were long considered a bit awkward or even forgotten. Today, we're going to solve the mystery of that missing tiara and unpack the hidden stories tucked into the brooches of this historic visit. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. The moment the royal plane touched down at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland marked the official start of the 2026 American state visit. This was a truly historic occasion, as the King and Queen arrived specifically to join the celebrations for the 250th anniversary of the United States independence. When they stepped out, Camilla looked wonderfully elegant in a soft pink Dior coat dress. I've noticed she selects this delicate shade quite regularly. She wore a very similar color when meeting the President of Nigeria, for instance. I really love how this tone looks on her. It feels so fresh and perfectly suited for a spring arrival for such a landmark milestone. Pinned to that pink coat was a bespoke Cartier brooch featuring the crossed flags of the United Kingdom and the United States, set in platinum with rubies, sapphires, and diamonds. A jewel combining the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes is, without a doubt, the most perfect diplomatic choice she could have made for this trip. But what makes this moment truly fascinating is that this isn't just a clever new accessory. It is a deeply significant piece of royal history that hasn't been seen in public for almost 70 years. It is always such a joy when Camilla delves into the archives and brings these forgotten treasures back into the light for us to admire. What makes this little brooch so incredibly special is the story attached to it. We have to rewind all the way to October 1957. A young Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip had just crossed the Atlantic for her very first American state visit as a reigning monarch. It was the height of the Cold War, and reinforcing the special relationship between the two nations was incredibly important. The young queen was met with absolute adoration, including a massive ticker tape parade in Manhattan. Later during that trip, at a grand luncheon for 1,700 guests at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the mayor of New York City, Robert F. Wagner, along with his wife Susan, presented her with a personal gift. It was this exact double flag brooch, designed as a lasting sign of friendship between the two countries. After that historic tour, the brooch quietly disappeared into the vast royal vaults. Bringing it back out for this specific arrival feels like a beautiful, silent tribute to the late Queen and her enduring legacy. While Monday's brooch was all about thoughtful, quiet diplomacy, the official White House welcome the following day called for something with a bit more historical gravity. Tuesday morning in Washington brought a gentle spring rain, offering a perfect moment to spot one of the most recognizable royal accessories, the transparent plastic umbrella. The Queen looked absolutely radiant in a pale spring green coat and dress, paired with a matching hat and soft ivory accessories. It is a wonderfully fresh silhouette for her, offering a bright pop of color against the gray weather. But if the bespoke flag brooch on Monday was a sweet, thoughtful gesture, the second day of the tour truly brought out the heavy artillery. Resting against that serene green coat was a jewel of unimaginable significance, a treasure that quite literally sat upon her head in Westminster Abbey just a few years ago. We are, of course, talking about the magnificent Cullinan V brooch. At its heart is a breathtaking 18.8-carat diamond, cut from the legendary 3,106-carat Cullinan rough stone discovered in 1905. The setting is a marvel. The heart-shaped gem radiates from an intricate platinum web, surrounded by dozens of smaller diamonds harvested from that same massive find. Queen Mary, with her unparalleled eye for jewelry design, supervised the creation of this specific masterpiece. She envisioned it as a versatile treasure, and she certainly treated it as one. She wore it as the centerpiece of her honeysuckle tiara, incorporated it into her grand Delhi Durbar stomacher, and even set it into her crown for the 1937 coronation of her son, King George VI. Decades later, Queen Camilla followed in those exact footsteps. During the historic coronation of King Charles in May 2023, the Cullinan V was placed front and center in Queen Mary's crown, taking the very spot where the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond had originally been affixed. Since taking on her new role, Queen Camilla has slowly been making the Cullinan V her own. We saw her wear it beautifully on a dove grey Dior ensemble for the races at Royal Ascot, and at a Buckingham Palace garden party before that. However, for many royal watchers, the Cullinan V will forever belong to one person, the late Queen Elizabeth II. She inherited the brooch in 1953 from her grandmother, Queen Mary, and over the decades, it truly became one of the pillars of her everyday wardrobe. Given its romantic heart shape, it is no surprise that Elizabeth often chose it for deeply sentimental family moments, like the wedding of Princess Eugenie. But for me, its most touching appearance was in 2020. The late Queen specifically selected this diamond for a portrait released to celebrate Prince Philip's 99th birthday. It turned out to be one of their final official photographs together. Knowing that, doesn't the heart-shaped stone suddenly feel so much more meaningful? There is such a specific historical resonance to this diamond in America. Back in 1983, on a drizzly day in Santa Barbara, Queen Elizabeth II wore the Cullinan V on her lapel to greet President Ronald Reagan. But what I find even more touching is that she didn't just save it for presidents. She loved this heart-shaped diamond so much that she'd wear it for the simplest private moments, from walking her dogs at Sandringham to family picnics at Balmoral. So for Camilla to select it for the official White House welcome feels like a very personal way to bring a piece of Elizabeth's heart and her history right back to Washington. But the White House welcome was only the beginning of a very busy Tuesday. Later that afternoon, King Charles and Queen Camilla traveled to the United States Capitol for his highly anticipated address to a joint session of Congress. For this second engagement of the day, Camilla did a quick change into a crisp white coat with delicate black accent stitching, an elegant piece she previously wore for VE Day commemorations. She also swapped her daytime pearls for a sleek pair of black pearl drops. And pinned to that white coat was a jewel that felt almost invisible, yet possessed a rather magical ability to change its color. The jewel in question is the Queen Mother's rock crystal brooch. It is a stunning Art Deco creation from the 1920s, widely believed to be the work of Cartier. The design is exquisite. Translucent rock crystal carved with intricate scroll patterns, featuring a diamond centerpiece, diamond edging, and very striking black enamel detailing. Because the crystal is completely translucent, it naturally takes on the exact shade of whatever fabric sits behind it. Pinned to her white coat, the crystal seamlessly blended with the background, allowing those delicate black enamel accents to beautifully echo the black stitching of her outfit. Let's trace this beautifully carved crystal back almost exactly a century. In 1927, during a major royal tour of Australia, the young Duchess of York, who would later become the beloved Queen Mother, was photographed wearing this very brooch. But she didn't wear it on a coat. In true 1920s fashion, she pinned it stylishly to the upturned brim of a cloche hat. But why choose a piece from Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother for this specific moment? During his address to Congress, King Charles actually spoke about his grandparents, recalling their landmark state visit to the U.S. in 1939, just before the outbreak of the Second World War. The Queen Mother was, in fact, the very first British Queen Consort to visit the United States in an official capacity. I cannot help but feel that Camilla has a very fine sense for these historical threads. By wearing a jewel that belonged to the woman who first charmed America as a consort, she brought a gentle, sentimental presence to the room. It feels like a subtle, loving nod to family history. As the afternoon at the Capitol drew to a close and the sun began to set over Washington, the atmosphere shifted toward the absolute pinnacle of royal glamour. State banquets are the moments we all wait for, expecting the most magnificent treasures to emerge from the vaults. But what awaited us at the White House doors that evening was a total surprise. A moment that made jewelry experts hold their breath. The dress code was strict white tie, and yet there was not a single tiara in sight. Why did Camilla decide to break such a long-standing royal tradition? While the absence of a glittering diadem definitely caused a stir among royal watchers, the true shock lay in what she chose to wear instead. Stepping out in an electric fuchsia evening gown by Fiona Clare, Queen Camilla debuted a treasure that has been sleeping in the dark for decades. She brought out the legendary Kent amethysts. To say this demi-parure is a statement piece would be a vast understatement. The necklace features massive, deep purple hexagonal amethysts surrounded by intricate, brilliant diamond scrolls, interspersed with delicate diamond star elements and elegant shell motifs. She paired it beautifully with the matching antique earrings. The sheer size, wattage, and historical gravity of these gems almost made up for the missing tiara. Looking at this look a bit more closely, I caught myself wondering how exactly this pairing came together. Because if we're being honest, a bright, warm fuchsia isn't the most obvious choice for deep, cool-toned amethysts. Instead of softly bringing out their color, the dress almost seems to challenge them a little. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like that might be exactly the point. If everything matched perfectly, it would be beautiful, yes, but also quite predictable. Here, there's a bit of tension between the gown and the jewels, and somehow that makes the whole look feel more alive. Those very traditional, almost antique stones suddenly don't feel heavy or old-fashioned. They feel current. And if you step back and look at the whole picture, it starts to make even more sense. The bold color, the scale of the necklace, and of course the decision to skip a tiara, it all feels quite intentional. Almost like the goal wasn't to quietly showcase the amethysts, but to create a strong, memorable presence. I'm really curious what you think, though. Would you have gone for something softer and more traditional, or do you like this kind of bold contrast? Stepping away from modern fashion debates, the story of these stones carries a weight that goes far beyond their impressive carat size. This is, in fact, one of the oldest surviving jewelry suites in the entire British royal collection, dating all the way back to the first half of the 19th century. The very first owner of this spectacular set was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, the Duchess of Kent, who is best known to history as the mother of Queen Victoria. Interestingly, the arrival of these amethysts into the royal vaults is deeply tied to a profound national tragedy. In 1817, Princess Charlotte, the only legitimate grandchild of King George IV, tragically died in childbirth. Her sudden passing plunged the British monarchy into a desperate succession crisis. In a frantic race for an heir, the Duke of Kent married Princess Victoria in 1818. They soon welcomed a daughter, the future Queen Victoria, but the Duke sadly passed away in 1820, before the little princess was even a year old. Finding herself a young widow, the Duchess entered a prolonged period of bereavement. In the 19th century, amethysts were traditionally worn as stones of mourning, which makes it perfectly fitting that this deep purple demi-parure became such a prominent and appropriate part of her wardrobe during those years. The Duchess of Kent truly cherished this suite, and we actually have a couple of wonderful visual records showing how she wore it. In a beautiful portrait based on an 1830s miniature, you can clearly see the distinct shell-shaped amethyst brooch with its 3 delicate pendants proudly pinned to her bodice. But there is also a magnificent painting from 1858 capturing the wedding of her granddaughter, the young Princess Victoria. If you look closely at the guests, you can spot the Duchess elegantly wearing the full amethyst demi-parure, including the grand necklace and those striking earrings. When the Duchess passed away in 1861, Queen Victoria inherited her beloved mother's amethysts. She held them in such high regard that she officially designated them as heirlooms of the crown, ensuring they would be passed directly from queen to queen for generations to come. Yet, if Queen Victoria so firmly intended for these gems to be passed down, their journey through the 20th century was unexpectedly quiet. Some royal experts note that Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was never really a fan of amethysts, which is likely why the set was rarely seen during her era. And what about Queen Elizabeth II? Well, it is a common misconception that she avoided them because she didn't like the color. In fact, the late Queen absolutely loved wearing saturated shades of purple and blue for her daytime engagements, and she wore the central brooch from this very set constantly. But that massive, intricate necklace? It seems the heavy, highly traditional 19th century design of the full necklace just didn't suit her personal style, keeping those magnificent gems waiting in the shadows for so long. During her historic 70-year reign, the late Queen wore the heavy necklace and earrings of this demi-parure in public only a couple of times. The most unforgettable of these rare appearances happened in March 1985, during a glittering state banquet in Portugal. For that evening, Elizabeth II brought out the full suite: the necklace, the earrings, and the shell-shaped brooch with its 3 pendants, pairing them all beautifully with the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. It was a breathtaking sight, a true display of royal majesty. Yet, after that, the massive necklace itself returned to the dark velvet drawers of the royal vaults. What's really fascinating, though, is the specific American connection. While the Queen usually wore the brooch on its own for daytime events, for her 1991 visit to the White House, she chose to wear it in its most grand, complete form. She attached all 3 pendants for one significant public appearance. It was the visit famous for the talking hat speech. Camilla's decision to wear the amethyst to her own White House banquet feels like a beautiful, subtle nod to her late mother-in-law's historic footsteps. But while Elizabeth kept it understated with just the brooch, Camilla seems to boldly challenge the quiet, almost mourning reputation of these stones, wearing the full, heavy necklace to the most joyful, vibrant reception of the year. It brings such a triumphant energy back to these historical gems. Let's drift a little further back into the archives, to the glamorous Edwardian era, because Queen Alexandra found a rather spectacular, unconventional way to use this exact necklace. Thanks to photographs from the state opening of Parliament in 1902, we know that Alexandra didn't wear this heavy piece around her neck at all. Instead, she draped elements of the amethyst necklace right down the front of her skirt, running as a chain between 2 of Queen Victoria's diamond bow brooches. To be completely honest, I sometimes really miss that era of bold royal styling. Today, it simply isn't the fashion to place grand jewels in such unexpected, flamboyant ways. I always love poring over old black and white photographs to see how cleverly Queen Mary or Queen Alexandra played with their collections, pinning priceless gems across their bodices and skirts. It is such a pity that the trend has faded away. Seeing those heavily jeweled, maximalist gowns in modern, high-definition color would be an absolute feast for the eyes. Camilla followed our modern-style rules in Washington, letting the necklace rest exactly where it was designed to. However, she did bring a touch of her own vision to the suite, subtly editing the demi-parure for the evening. First, as we know, Queen Camilla does not have pierced ears. To wear the antique amethyst earrings for this state banquet, the palace jewelers carefully converted them into clips for her, the exact same sensitive adjustment we recently saw with the King George VI sapphire earrings. Second, looking closely at her neckline, it seems to me that the necklace itself was shortened just a tiny bit to sit better against her neck. And third, she chose to remove the 3 amethyst pendants from the bottom of the necklace, the very same drops we saw dancing on the piece when Queen Elizabeth II wore the full set in Portugal. Interestingly, this is not the first time Camilla has stripped back a heavy antique piece to suit her own taste. She made a very similar choice with the rare Greville emerald necklace. While Elizabeth II wore the emeralds in their full, magnificent configuration, Camilla removed the dropping emeralds and slightly shortened the necklace to keep it from overwhelming her look. To finish off her gala look, Camilla added a final rhythmic sparkle to her wrists with a pair of bracelets that have clearly become her absolute favorites for these grand occasions. On one arm, she wore an elegant all-diamond version, while the other was adorned with a version set with rich rubies. These Cartier pieces are incredibly versatile, and it is easy to see why they are her go-to choice for a state banquet. They have a certain understated architectural beauty that doesn't try to compete with a heavy necklace or a bold gown. In a room full of high-wattage glamour, they offer a refined, almost quiet elegance. Yet, despite their relatively modest appearance, their history is deeply romantic. The bracelets belong to a set of 5 Art Deco treasures, 2 made of pure diamonds, and 3 others featuring sapphires, emeralds, and rubies. They were individual gifts from the future King George VI to the Queen Mother during their early years of marriage in the 1920s. He presented them to her for various Christmases and birthdays, and she famously loved to wear them all at once, stacked jauntily on her wrist. Of course, I cannot talk about this evening without addressing the one thing many of us were waiting for, or rather, the one thing that wasn't there. Reading through the reactions to this visit, I saw so much of my own heart reflected back at me. There was that initial thrill of seeing the amethysts return to the light, but it was accompanied by a lingering sense of disappointment that the Queen's hair remained unadorned. It is a bit of a bittersweet trend, isn't it? We are seeing tiaras become an almost optional element, even at the most formal white tie events. For those of us who love the history and craftsmanship of these pieces, it's a quiet tragedy. Every time a diadem stays in the vault, we lose one of the few remaining opportunities to see these magnificent, storied treasures doing exactly what they were created to do. If we try to rationalize why Camilla made this choice, a few things come to mind. First, there is the undeniable weight of diplomacy. Increasingly, on state visits to republics, and the United States in particular, the royal ladies seem to follow an unwritten rule. It is a subtle way of reading the room. Wearing a tiara in a country that historically defined itself by moving away from the monarchy can sometimes feel a bit mismatched, or perhaps even a little too regal for the setting. It's a tactical move to appear dignified and queenly without leaning too heavily on the ancient symbols of inherited power. There is also the matter of balance within the couple and the context of the event. A tiara might have completely dominated the headlines, overshadowing the actual purpose of the visit or Charles's address to Congress. By focusing on the amethysts, Camilla was able to weave that beautiful thread back to Queen Elizabeth II's own visit without the jewelry becoming the only story of the night. In a way, it was a masterclass in tact. Yet, I find myself hoping that this doesn't become the new permanent standard. These jewels are part of a living history, and they deserve their moment in the sun. I truly hope that in the future, our royal ladies will continue to surprise and delight us with that unmistakable royal sparkle. After all, what is a state banquet without a little bit of magic? The final stage of this historic tour brought the royal couple to the bustling heart of New York City. On Wednesday, the King and Queen paid a deeply moving visit to the 9/11 memorial. And here, Camilla once again turned to the image of a female warrior. But this was not a call to battle. Rather, it was a quiet testament to strength of spirit. We have seen her wear the staggering, world-famous Cullinan diamonds and the massive Kent amethysts over the course of this trip. But for this solemn moment, we shift to a piece that is far more modest in its financial value. Jewelry experts estimate it at around 4,400 pounds, yet what it lacks in massive carat weight, it more than makes up for in profound meaning. The brooch depicts Britannia, the personified national symbol of Britain. Crafted in white gold, the miniature warrior goddess is exquisitely detailed. She is beautifully shown seated, wearing a traditional Corinthian helmet. In one hand, she holds a trident, and in the other, a delicate olive branch. Right beside her rests a shield, sparkling with rubies and sapphires, arranged in the familiar pattern of the Union Jack. This fascinating little jewel actually carries 2 very distinct sides to its history. By design, it is a diamond-encrusted replica of the cap badge worn by the old Royal Norfolk Regiment, a piece that was also previously worn by the Queen Mother. But Camilla seems to have breathed an entirely new modern life into it. Later that same day, Her itinerary took her to the New York Public Library, where she was photographed alongside Sarah Jessica Parker. It is quite intriguing to notice exactly when Camilla chooses to wear this specific brooch. While it has deep military roots, she has increasingly worn this warrior goddess for engagements centered around female empowerment and resilience. She chose it earlier this year when visiting a center supporting survivors of domestic abuse, and again to celebrate a history-making all-female yachting crew. It truly feels as though the Britannia brooch has quietly become her own personal jewelry code, a gleaming badge of female strength that she brings out when the occasion calls for it. Do you think we will continue to see her use this historic military emblem as her signature piece for women's causes? As the bustling energy of New York began to settle, the royal tour gracefully moved towards its conclusion. Thursday morning found the King and Queen back in Washington for their official farewell. They gathered in the diplomatic reception room of the White House to say their goodbyes to President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. For this final meeting, Camilla wore a very elegant royal blue dress, and pinned to it was a jewel that brought a wonderfully personal touch to the farewell. It was a vintage, floral-inspired brooch, crafted from 18-karat gold, set with brilliant diamonds and rich rubies. This piece, however, did not emerge from the depths of the ancient royal vaults. It was actually created by the iconic American jeweler Tiffany & Co., and it was a diplomatic gift presented to Camilla by the Trumps during their state visit to the United Kingdom just last September. I always find it fascinating to see how the royals handle diplomatic gifts. Often, they are carefully cataloged and stored away for years. But Camilla actually debuted this brooch on the very day she received it at Windsor Castle in 2025. Bringing it back across the Atlantic to wear during this specific farewell was a quiet, masterfully polite gesture. Following the White House farewell, the couple traveled to Arlington National Cemetery to lay a wreath in honor of the UK-US military partnership. It was a profoundly solemn moment, quietly echoing the steps taken by Queen Elizabeth II in 1957 and 1991, and by King George VI before her in 1939. The day then ended on a much lighter note at a Virginia block party, meeting local beekeepers and even a newborn lamb named after the king. For these final hours on American soil, Camilla made one last, highly significant jewelry change. She reached back into her travel box and brought out the bespoke Cartier crossed flags brooch, featuring the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes. I always love it when things come full circle like this, don't you? It was just so perfect that she started the week in Maryland with that 1957 gift on her lapel, and then decided to bring it back out for the very last stop. It almost felt like she was using that little brooch to bookend the entire visit. It tied everything together and brought the story right back to where it all began. Looking back at this whirlwind week, I am truly struck by how carefully Queen Camilla curated her jewel box for the United States. From the awe-inspiring weight of the Kent amethysts and the dazzling Cullinan V to the subtle diplomacy of the Tiffany and Cartier brooches, she used her jewelry not just to sparkle, but to communicate. I would absolutely love to hear which piece from this historic tour resonated with you the most. Were you captivated by the sheer grandeur of the amethysts at the White House? Or perhaps touched by the quiet sentimentality of the Queen Mother's rock crystal brooch at the Capitol? Pour yourself another cup of tea and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I always enjoy reading them so much. If you found our time together today cozy and enjoyable, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. After all, these precious gems may be silent, but their stories never are, just as long as we continue to tell them. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time for another journey into the royal vaults.